In this video, you and I together are going to be reviewing code once again like we are senior React developers. This is a series that you guys love so much to watch, I love so much to make, and we're all happy. And the code that I have for you today is really cool. There's a lot of cool lessons that we can learn from this, and I promise you, you will not regret watching this video. But first, I just want to say a quick word from our sponsor, which is once again me. I want to talk to you about Import React, which is my free newsletter that's all about React. You can use it to keep up to date with all the latest and greatest that is going on in the React world, which is something that I do personally. And also I share in there cool tips and tricks and personal stuff that I don't share anywhere else that is going to make you a better React developer. If you're interested, I highly recommend it. I left a link for you in the description. Cool. Now let's get into the code review. All right, so let's begin. So this is the repository that we're going to be reviewing. This was actually sent to me on the Discord. So if you want your code to be reviewed on the channel, send it on the Discord and I'll be happy to review it. This is the code here. I cloned it locally on my machine. You'll have a link in the description. And one thing to note is that the last commit was 2 years ago, which is totally fine. This means that this developer has probably significantly improved since then. And we need to keep that in mind when reviewing this code. All right, so let's begin. I have the code open up here. And let's see what we are working with. So this is a Vite project. As you can see here, my face is probably in the way, but again, trust me, it is there. Let's go in SRC. Let's find the main folder and let's see the entry point to the application. So over here, we have an error boundary component, which is actually funny because I just filmed a video on error boundaries. And I believe this is using, the exact same library. Highly recommend using error boundaries in your application. So this is a good sign that this error already knows and is thinking about how to handle his errors. Then we have some providers here, which is fine. I want to go into app roots, which I assume is all of the roots of the application. And what are we using here? Are we using React Router? This looks like React Router. I think, we have React Router. There we go. We are using React Router. Cool. So let's see here. First thing that I really like is the fact that we have lazy imports for all of our components. This is something that usually you should do if you're using your own custom routing solution, which React Router, I believe at the time of this code is not the framework, just the library. So this makes a lot of sense. And it shows that the developer knows about lazy loading, knows about bundle sizes, and has at least tried to optimize that by lazy importing all of the specific pages. Cool. Then we have this app roots component here, which checks the logged in state of the user using this hook. And then if we are logged in, gets the protected routes, otherwise the public routes, creates the browser router, which I don't think you need to spread this because it is an array. So like you can just put this here, makes this a bit simpler, and then passes it to the router provider. And this is what we get exported to the main entry point of the application. Cool, no problem so far. Now I did glance a little bit at the code beforehand, and this is a social media application. So really the core of the application is what has to do with posts. So I want to look at the posts because there are some interesting things there that I think we can really learn from the posts. So over here, we have the index, It's running the app component, and the app component is a simple shell that I think just has here a navbar, and then the outlet, which gets all of its children. And one of those children is the posts over here, So let's open up the posts and let's see what this component is all about. Okay, so we have the props over here. So we have tag, which is an optional string. Okay, and then we have bookmarks, which is a Boolean. So this is very confusing to me because bookmarks as a Boolean kind of indicates to me that we are using this as a way to mark, are we showing bookmarks? Are we on the bookmarks page? As opposed to using the bookmarks as a filter, Because the tag over here looks to me, at least right now, as a sort of filter, What tag are we filtering the posts by? But the bookmarks being a Boolean is a little bit questionable, and I'm very curious to see how we're actually using this in this code. Then we have this infinite shimmer post, which is essentially a skeleton that just renders a couple of posts here using the shimmer component, so that's fine. Then we have posts here, we're using tag, we're using bookmarks, and then we're using username here, which comes from the parameter. So this is a hook from React Router, which essentially tells you that we have the username in the URL. If I go back here to the app router, where is it? The app router. Are we using posts in multiple places? Because I think that we are. If I just look at posts, let's see. Element posts, tag, post by tag. Okay, that's not it. Home. So we're using the posts here. Onboarding. I'm pretty sure I saw a post somewhere else. Aha, there it is. We have user and then username, and then here we have post and we're using that here. Very interesting that we chose to get the username from this hook and then the tag and the bookmarks from the other from props, right? It's a bit interesting, but whatever, we can move on. Then we have this is loading here, which really looks like React query, but then we have get posts, which is this a hook? I think this is a hook, right? We have is load, it has to be a hook. What is this returning? It's returning use infinite query. This is a hook. Okay, so that's another problem. Get post should not be called that at all. It should be use get post, right? This is a custom hook. You want to make the differentiation, and the React compiler, actually, if you don't name this correctly, is not even going to compile your code. This code base is like some 2 years old, so keep that in mind, but still you want to adopt these patterns because you want to follow the rules of React. And here I believe I need to change this to use get posts, and here we're going to do use get posts, and we're going to import it here as well and get rid of get posts, right? So already this is a little bit better because now we know that this is a hook and we can kind of tell that this is a React query hook. Let's look more at this hook because I don't like what I saw. So we have use get post here. It's taking the username, the tag, and the bookmarks, right? And then it's, if we have a tag, it's setting a limit. Otherwise, oh, I think I know what this is doing. Then we have get post, page param. No. I know what this is doing, and this is not okay. So if we have a tag, we're going to return this endpoint from Axios. If we have bookmarks, we're going to return this endpoint, which is a different endpoint, right? /post/get/t and then tag /bookmarks. The bookmarks are the user's bookmarks, right? The ones that you saved. That's what this is, okay? Then if you have a username, we're getting all the posts for a specific username. I don't like this. And then if we don't have any of those, we're getting social media /posts. I don't like this because then we get this get query key function, which has to account for all the cases. And then we have everything and we're passing it to use infinite query. This is a great example of trying to make something too reusable. And I just made a video about this not that long ago, where intermediate React developers or junior to intermediate React developers have this tendency to make everything reusable just because that's what we usually say that React is supposed to be done. But that's actually not correct, and especially in this case, because if you look here, we have username, tag, and bookmarks, right, which looks like filters, right? If I didn't look at this code, my initial impression was that these are some sort of filters, right? We're filtering the posts of a specific username, of tags, or of specific bookmarks, right? But these are not filters. These are actually 3 distinct pages that show distinct data and have their own endpoints to show that data. These are not the same thing, right? They shouldn't go in the same hook. Instead, what this should have been, and this should have been 3 or I think even 4 custom hooks, all that fetch the post. You should have one hook for the tags, right? Use post by tag, right? Or something like that, call it that. In that, you would just have this one singular function, right? And you would have this one singular query key that is related to the tag over here and nothing else. And then you would still use this use infinite query here, and you would just put the same code and return that as a separate hook. And then you would do that for all of these different things, for the username, for the bookmarks, and then just for the normal posts. You would have 4 custom hooks and you would use them in 4 different places. And then what I think is going on here in this post component here, if I'm not mistaken, this post component here is being used in different places. What is this post by tag here? It's post by tag. Is it the same thing? Yeah, you see, it is returning this post over here. This is a very confusing component. It's a mess of a component because this to me feels like a page component, which is supposed to render everything for a specific page. But in one case, it is being used as a page here, post, right? It's being used as an actual page. And in another page, it is used as a subcomponent as part of that page component. And so what ends up happening is you have to put all of this functionality here, the tags, the bookmarks, and then get the username here, and then pass all of them to this one custom hook who's also trying to do everything. And then you get a big mess. And I can understand why this was done this way, because at the end of the day, you are fetching posts, right? The final entity that you're fetching is a post, but it doesn't mean that you have to have one hook for everything and fetch all of the posts. I usually go by the endpoint, right? And I have one custom hook for specific endpoints, even if that endpoint returns to me the same data. So actually what I would do is I would create 4 separate pages for each individual thing. Those would be page components. They would be root level. They would have their own individual custom hooks each page, and then they would use anything that is perhaps in common, like a post list component that can receive all the posts and can just handle the actual rendering of that specific post, right? That would follow the single responsibility principle, which this hook and this component here obviously doesn't. But then there's another problem that I noticed here, and that's actually very suspicious suspicious to me. If you look here at the return, we're using use infinite query, which is fine, right? This is a hook from React Query that you can use to get infinite fetching. But then if you go back here to the post, we're using the is loading that you get from that use infinite query hook, and then we're using it to actually show this shimmer post, the skeleton of the posts. But we actually don't need this at all, because if you go back here to the app router, we're actually on this post over here, we're using suspense, and then we're providing shimmer posts as the fallback of suspense. So if you don't know how suspense works, essentially you wrap a part of your component tree, in this case, the post component and all of its subcomponents. And then if anything asynchronous happens in that component, that asynchronous, that loading state is not going to happen inside of this component, but instead the component is not going to get rendered, is going to be suspended until the loading finishes, and then it's going to be rendered. And then the loading actually happens in the suspense component, which makes sense, right? Because then you can actually come in the component itself, and then instead of doing the loading here, if I open up this get post once again, instead of doing the actual use infinite query, what we should have done is we should have done use suspense infinite query. This is the same hook. I believe I have to, which doesn't seem to be importing, because it might be the case that this is not using the latest package of React Query, which may not have use suspense infinite query. You can see here it's not exported. It is a hook that exists, trust me on this, and you can use it interchangeably with use infinite query. And what this is going to do is this is actually no longer going to have the loading happen inside of this component. So you're no longer going to get the loading here. The loading is instead going to happen at the nearest suspense boundary, and the fallback here is going to get triggered. And so if you're using suspense here, you actually want to do that. You want to use the use suspense infinite query instead, because then you no longer have to do this. You no longer have to do is loading. And then you also get a benefit that your data here is always going to be defined. Because the loading happens outside of the component, inside of the suspense boundary, the data is always going to be defined, because this component is not going to get rendered unless there is data. And you're going to be able to see it here with the types. Now, obviously it's not working because we don't have the correct version of React Query, but your data here is no longer going to be undefined because of that, which means you no longer have to do all of this question mark here, right? This optional chaining, you don't have to do that. Maybe you need to do it for the post, because in this specific case, that's what the API returns, right? So that's outside of the scope of React Query, but you can just directly use the data here, not worry about the loading, and it just simplifies everything just by using a suspense boundary. So this had the good intention, but the execution fell short because he missed and he did not use suspense query. Now, fair enough, it may not have been available at the time. In that case, just don't use the suspense, because ultimately it is not doing anything. And actually, speaking about this is really something important that you should know about React. As we're going into modern React, it's generally a good approach to try to move the loading and data handling outside of React components as much as possible. That's generally the initiative with server components, right? You move it outside of a client component. And then even if you're working in client components, try to move it inside of a loader. For example, if you're using something like React Router or Tanstack Router, right? They have loaders. Fetch your data inside of the loaders and pull it outside of the component. It generally is going to make your life a lot easier, because then the component just has data directly and you can use it without have to worrying about any sort of re-renders or undefined data in your components. Cool. So then I guess let's look at this infinite scroll component, because I have my doubts just by the rest of the code. So what is this doing? Is loading, and then we have a use effect here with the debounce timer. Okay. Then we have a handle scroll, which is going to clear the timer. Then we create a new timer, set timeout. We get the window height, the scroll wide, the page height, the threshold. And if we're not loading and we have window height and it's greater than the page height minus the threshold, we're going to fetch the next. Oh no, that's bad. This is not the way to handle your infinite scroll. What we're doing here is we're attaching this on the window scroll event, and then if I'm not mistaken here, as soon as we're past this 100 threshold, so as soon as we've scrolled 100 pixels, we're going to be continuously refreshing the next page until there's no more data to actually fetch, even if we haven't scrolled to like the page after that. That's definitely not the way they want to do this, because this is highly inefficient. We're scrolling unnecessarily. And as soon as you scroll like past 100, even if your posts are like super big and like you would have to scroll much more to actually get to the next page, we're still going to fetch all of the pages continuously on a loop until we have no more pages. That's wrong. Instead, what you should do is you create an element, right? Actually, I can show you instead. So spoiler alert, this is code from my upcoming advanced patterns React course. So don't tell anyone that I'm showing you this because this is really unreleased code. But essentially what you do is you create here a infinite scroll component, right? And then you create a container ref, a ref for the container, which is going to be some div that you put at the bottom of all of your content. So here we have the children at the bottom. Below, we're putting this ref here. And then you use the intersection observer API, which essentially will just allow you to tell if an element is intersecting the viewport, so if it's visible on the screen, and if it is, you're just going to call the load more function to fetch more posts. That way, you're doing this on demand only when this element is visible or you're actually fetching more posts. And then once you fetch that page, you're not going to fetch any more pages until you reach the bottom and this element becomes visible once again. This is the correct way how to do it, and not this other way over here that we have. This one, right? So again, I would refactor this. I would push against this in a code review because this is not the correct way to do things. And finally, let's look at one more thing because this video got too long already, but still I think it was really valuable. What do we have here? So we have bookmarks and then some codes to run the bookmarks. Again, we are having to check the username, the bookmarks, because everything is in this one component, which could have been avoided if we had separate components. That's fine. Then exactly, see, this is what I mean. We have username here, we're checking the username. If we don't have a tag and if we don't have bookmarks, we can just create the post display, put a separate component and just put that component here without having any of these checks. It is going to simplify your life a lot. And then what do we have here? Post refetch context provider, refetch page post ID. What is this? Is this what I think it is? What is this? We are refetch, use context, post refetch. Are we dispatch on success? Okay, I get why this was done this way. So what they did is, that's a very interesting way of doing it. I would not have done it this way. They created a context for the postcard and any of its subcomponents. They passed it here the refetch function, which comes from this here, from the use infinite query hook, which then they use in a mutation to delete the comment, I guess, and refetch the posts. Because when they delete a comment, they need to refetch the post to show that the comment is no longer there in the post, I would assume. That's not the best way to do things, and instead you just use the query client from React Query and invalidate the queries, right? Like let's see, is there a query client anywhere here? We are using a query client. We're using it to set the data. Okay, this is doing, I think, an optimistic update. We're canceling the queries, setting the queries, right? Why not just then come here and then do query client dot invalidate queries and then posts, and then we no longer have to do this, or perhaps even refetch comment as well. You can just invalidate the queries, right? Why was it not done, right? This is a simple thing that we can just easily fix. And then I would assume we no longer would even need to have a provider here, and we could just render the postcard. And then let's see the postcard. Oh my God, what is this use disclosure? I don't even want to look at that. But this postcard, right, delete post over here, right? We would just use the query client and then invalidate the queries like we did here. What? Delete post, invalidate queries. We just did it here. Why didn't we do it in the delete comment, right? If you're going to do it in one place, do it in all the other places, right? So this developer knew that you could do this. When was this committed? This was, oh, come on, Copilot, 16 months ago, okay? And when was this committed? I mean, now, since I've changed it, but let's undo this. When was this committed? 16 months ago. So they knew about this at the same time, but didn't apply it in the same places, right? So that's inconsistency. Use the query client. It's just better. It's easier. It's one line of code, and you can invalidate many more queries. I think this is the signature, yeah. You can invalidate many more queries super easily in just literally one line of code. And then I'm sorry, I can't help myself. I just want to go back to postcard, which is named post. That's inconsistent, right? I just want to see what is this use disclosure. That's the last thing, and then I promise I'm going to stop. I just couldn't help myself. What is use disclosure? It's open, close, toggle. This is like a toggle state. Why is it called use disclosure? Like we're disclosing something. I think the English here is a little bit ambiguous. So that's what it is, toggle states. Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's just English, but like call this like use toggle state, right? And it is open, close. I feel that just makes a little bit more sense, but that's it. I'm just not gonna, I'm gonna close this component before I go into more stuff because it's neither here or there. I think that's enough for this review. I think that we kind of looked over enough things, and I think that we learned enough and that this was valuable for us as React developers. Let me know in the comments down below if I was too harsh on this code. Once again, this is like 16-month-old code, so this developer has for sure 100% become significantly better. This is part of the normal learning process. I wrote code that was way worse than this when I was learning React, so this is totally fine. There are some good things in here, but there are some things that need a little bit of work and some concepts that need a little bit of refining. But again, that's fine. That is just part of the learning process. So once again, leave me a comment if you think that I was a bit too harsh, or just your general thoughts on this code base. I would really, really love to know. So that's it. That's all that I had for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe. It's completely free, so why not? Or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Kozin. This is Kozin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.